You're listening to the Waypoint TV Podcast Network, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Knives, machetes, saws, and shears, multi-tools, shovels, swords, axes, spears, hatchets, and tomahawks. If it cuts, snips, slices, or chops, Midway USA has it. Find great gift ideas in our huge selection of pocket knives and other everyday carry folding knives. Make a statement or create a family legacy with one of our top-of-the-line hunting knives. We've got a great selection of manual and electric sharpeners, too. For just about everything for the outdoors, check out MidwayUSA.com.
Hey everyone, this is Captain Steve Roger from Into the Blue TV. And as soon as I feel a little break from this heat, I know that hunting season is upon us. Actually, the first time I ever went hunting, a buddy took me. Wasn't my father or my grandfather. In fact, I took my father on his very first hunt. Well, Academy Sports and Outdoor Stores has everything to gear up for the field for less. Plus, you can shop a wide selection of ammo, shotguns, deer corn, rifle, feeder, game cameras, camo, and more from the brands you trust. Text HUNT24 to 22369 to take $20 off a $100 purchase when you shop hunting supplies at academy.com. Need a hunting license? Pick it up in store while you're shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And their Black Friday sale is live right now, 40% off using code HUNT40CY. That's HUNT40CY. And that Black Friday sale stops, it ends 12/3. So get over there. I'll say it again, Grayling hoodie and the Shelton vest is about the best combo that you can come up with. It's probably one of my favorite setups. You can look at that Saskatoon Heat Boost vest. It's a little bit, I think the cut is a little bit bigger than the Shelton vest. I really enjoy the Shelton kind of over that Heat Boost one, but I use both. So definitely check that out. Latitude, keep an eye on their site as well. Their Black Friday deals are coming. Looks like 30% off over there. Been using that Maverick saddle and really, really like that. And that Ranger 22 pack is freaking just about perfect. I'm gonna have to do a video on it. The only thing I don't like about it, the straps for the gear tie downs and stuff like that are like super long. But other than that, that pack, as far as being versatile, we used it all week with the gear compression pad on the outside for bringing in clothing. Had my platform under there, other stuff just tucked in there, frickin' just about absolutely perfect on the design on that. The straps are a little long, but that's easily fixable. Check that out. And then, their carbon sticks are by far my favorite stick that I've used. Just an incredible piece of gear. So check them out. The guys over at Canadian Zinger still making a great product, still shooting their arrows, and very durable, awesome. Check those out. Zingers are freaking amazing for guys who don't like to fletch arrows like myself. Shout out to the guys over at Big Shot Targets. You can use code BCP 10% there to save 10%. And Spartan Forge, you can save 25% using code Bowhunter. We talk about it in this episode, but if you're haven't looked at their LiDAR when you're hunting, when you're getting set up, a lot of that stuff was instrumental in our success in Tennessee. So the LiDAR, being able to see those trails, being able to see through that foliage, definitely check that out. That stuff there is freaking amazing. I've got to give a couple shout outs to some Patreons. During the gun season, had some guys that were knocking them down. Matt Michalek with the 6-point. Tom Taylor out in Montana finally getting a bull getting a bull down like 3 mile pack out, just insane. Keegan Gozlowski in Wisconsin shot his first deer. He shot a doe with his bow, first deer with a bow, and then a first buck with a bow on public land. Just amazing. I know I'm missing some guys. It's been a long week, but those are the ones that kind of stick out right off the top of my head. Obviously, Tim Clark and the Clark boys. Those guys are always killing tons and tons of things. So shout out to them as well. And this podcast, again, it kind of goes back to the podcast that I did with Kevin Vistison on the Deer Hunter podcast about, taking that adventure, going out of state, challenging yourself, sharing that camp, all of these things that we talk about just about on every episode. Just amazing trip. And we're going to break down kind of how it went, kind of what it's like to, even for Brad to scout and to hunt your home state, like an out of state hunt. He hunted with us, and kind of run and gun style that's what we were doing the whole time. Obviously we were out of state. We were on a time crunch. So we were trying to be as efficient as possible. And, we get into kind of all of that. So as always, thanks for listening. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Thank you so much. Ooh. All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. It's like I've forgotten how to do this. You skip 1 week and it's like totally off my game. So we're gonna recap our hunt down in Tennessee, kind of like the whole idea of like what we were doing like in Tennessee, what the whole plan was, and kind of how everything went. And so to start. So Eric was on here, Eric Nelson, and then Brad Collings, both have been on the show before. Eric's the guy that I always go to for the water access. So after the first of the year almost, Walt from the Southern Collective had reached out to me and asked if I wanted to go do a hunt in Kentucky with some water access and yada, yada, yada. Known Walt for like 7 years, never met the man still after all this time. And that has not changed. Still have not met him. He put in for a different quota hunt and with a rifle, drew it, and it didn't line up with the dates that we had figured out. So it was like everything was up in the air. Like we didn't have to go to Kentucky anymore. And with Eric, generally speaking, he says, this is when my vacation resets. Where are we hunting? Or are we going to hunt somewhere this year or whatever? And I'm always like on the fence. I think last year I went to Kansas and I screwed that up because we were supposed to apply for Kansas or get a point and not go to Kansas. So I screwed it up. But the year before that, Eric's like, are we going anywhere this year? Like, where are we going? We going to Wisconsin?
Last year we still went to Indiana last year.
Yeah. But you're like, where are we going? What are we doing?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we did go to Indiana last year. And so Eric really doesn't care. He's like, I just want to see new territory. And then where we were planning on going was near Tennessee. Brad's down in Tennessee, and he came up to the Patreon hunt, and he's like, I'm going to be right by there. You can come and hunt with me. And we were like, I don't know. I don't know about that. And then we were like, okay, yeah, I guess we'll do that. And then everything like snowballed, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. Like, oh yeah, all the WMAs closed like right in the middle of the time frame you're going to be down there. Oh, it's supposed to be like thunderstorms the whole time you're planning on going down there. Oh shit, I forgot that it's muzzleloader season also when you're going to be down there. And it was like, there was like all these things that said, you probably shouldn't go to Tennessee. And for whatever reason, we were like, okay, we'll go down there and hunt. I guess we'll just go, but it kind of kept stacking the odds like against us. I felt like, and Eric, you being the like go with the flow type of guy, how did you feel about like all those things that were like, look, because we hunted in Missouri before, like on the youth hunt, like we didn't know about that during the time change, like all sorts of stuff. So we've been through some things.
About a week, 2 weeks before we were going to leave, I was actually wondering if we were actually going to go because everything was just going against us. So, but it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to still hunt somewhere.
Yeah, we were still going somewhere.
Yeah,
for sure. We just weren't sure exactly where, but
and so I guess like, what's your thought process on like going out of state to hunt? Because like literally, you're the epitome of like it doesn't matter like where we're just going to go hunt somewhere. And I think that that's really intimidating to some or to most people, I would say.
Intimidating to not know where they're going.
Yeah, to have like no idea, not to not know where you're going, but like let's say that we decided like, oh, we were going to go to South Dakota and hunt with my brother, or like we were going to go back to Ohio, or we were going to say, I mean, it was a real possibility. I was thinking about going back to Wisconsin. Like how would that have changed your mindset?
I don't really think it would have affected it at all because I just go with the flow. I just started scouting there instead of scouting in Tennessee. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Out of state is out of state. It's a new area that I want to see and check out. I like the adventure. And
so, Brad, we show up, and you had mentioned that you had a conversation with your wife that she was like, "Oh, those guys are here. Like, aren't you gonna go show them around or whatever?" Like, when we showed up, what were your thoughts?
Honestly, you guys had a way better plan, probably a better plan than I've had all season for where you were going to head to. And then I was driving back from Gatlinburg as you guys were getting there or pulling in that first day. So you were texting me. I was trying to drive and text, and it was just a mess there for a minute.
But we show up to start hunting. I mean, and you came in like, I think you came in with a pizza, and I ate the whole thing. And because we showed up and we got in like 3:00 or something, and it was raining, and we went out and we just drove around. We were like literally just that night driving around, and had that was Saturday, and had no plans on hunting on Sunday. Really, we were just going to scout and kind of do, what you're supposed to do, quote unquote, what all these podcasts and all these guys that hunt out of state are supposed to do. And it was funny because like Brad lives there, hunts there, does all this stuff there. And we're like, here's a boat launch. There's walk-in access up here. We're going to drive around. He's like, there's no road up there. You can't get in up there. Like, yeah, I mean, unless in Tennessee they have roads on the map that are like blocked off or private, like I'm pretty sure we can get there. And so we just drove around and we saw a ton of deer driving around and saw some good bucks. And I mean, right off the get-go, standing there in the rain with the binoculars, I mean, I think we were pretty excited, optimistic, would you say, Eric?
Oh yeah, we rolled in there and we were glassing buck chasing a doe within 2 hours of getting there. I mean, that's a good sign right there. That started off the pace, I think, for the whole week. And we just kept rolling with it.
Yeah, and we were optimistic, and I felt like, I mean, kind of like what Brad said, I felt pretty like locked in as far as like, I think we had a really solid plan like going into it. And it was just a matter of like, if we got into where we had scouted, and if there was going to be deer there or not. But like, I think one of the things that was really good about this, and if guys are looking at an out of state hunt and trying to do this and say, okay, I want to just go to an area, like we picked somewhat on the grand scheme of things, like very small pieces. And I'm not talking like 200 acres. I'm talking like 2,000 acres. But in the world of like, say where we do our Patreon hunt, where it's 200,000 acres or 2 million acres, like we just picked things that we could break down into chunks and kind of see what was going on. And I think that had worked out pretty well for us, right?
Yeah, for sure. the smaller, I guess, smaller compared to, like you said, the Patreon hunt. It's a lot easier to look at it on the map and weed over the stuff you don't even want to look at real quick before you even get there. So we both had multiple pins that we had placed, just e-scouting before we got there.
And so, like, Brad, you had mentioned to us being down there kind of running around doing what we were doing, that was kind of all new for you, like e-scouting and like looking at terrain features and stuff like that. So tell us your experience, like going in and doing like how everything was flying by the seat of our pants, as you say. You want to go explore new places in the dark? Like, absolutely.
Yup. Let's go.
Yeah. That is like you said, super foreign to me. That was my first time really, I guess like we kind of talked yesterday. I guess I was like, we had to be in before dark. If you were going to get there at like gray light, like you might as well not even go. Like, I've always been in there super early. There's 2 or 3 times this year I've honestly I've backed out of like didn't even go hunting because I got up and I pissed around for 15 minutes and wasted my time and thought, oh no, I'm not going to see anything, so I just left. And I think, like Eric had mentioned it, and I think some of that comes to, I feel like the deer here move super early, super late. There's not a whole lot of that midday movement, late morning movement that like a lot of the Midwestern guys talk about. And I'm sure somebody that like hunts a mile from here is going to tell me I'm an idiot, but all the spots I go into, I just don't see it, and the cameras don't show it. So like I kind of, I hit it real hard, real early, and then I hit it hard, for that afternoon sit. And to go in like we did that second morning, or I guess my second morning hanging out with you guys, in the boat, kayak across in the dark, walk in at gray light, walk up, set up, and then be immediately in deer that the 3 of us was eye-opening, I guess is the only way to describe it. It really changed my perspective on timing and being in the woods.
It's go ahead.
I was just going to say, and this was a spot that Adam pinned, and Brad had never been there, right? So
I've been once during turkey season, and I kept like, oh, I'll go back, but it's that whole like, and Adam's talked about it before with the Patreon hunt and whatever, like the hunting in state, like you're hunting out of state kind of mentality. And like, if I'm on deer in spots, why would I leave deer to go to this spot to see if I might find some deer? I guess that's how. So I've always just kind of like played the odds in my favor and stayed in the spots that made sense or that I knew better. And I never went back in there. And now, hindsight being 2020, after spending a week with you guys, there's a bunch of places that I'm going in. I promise I will be in there, whether it's right now or whether it's over the next couple months through scouting and doing that type of stuff. And I'm sure we'll get deeper into that. But you guys definitely ruined my hunting style for the better, I guess.
Well, and you talk about like leaving deer to find deer or whatever, and I think like there's a real like fine line between, and I've had this conversation a lot like with Frank, and he's like, well, I kill a ton of deer. Like, what do you mean? I don't have to hunt different. Like, I don't got to do anything different. Like, I don't have a problem killing deer. And I think that's kind of like where you land, Brad. And I think where we were at, there was deer. There's no shortage of deer. Like, we basically saw deer just about every time. And a lot of them were in bow range. I mean, Eric still has never shot a doe. He's like, yeah, I'm not into that. It's not my thing. But I think, Brad, for you, it's like, we talked about it. And when Eric and I were scouting around, like when you had to work or, be with your family or like whatever, we're just not finding the sign that we're looking for. Like, we're not seeing sign. And you're like, the deer just don't lay down that much sign here. There's just not that much sign. And then I think as you came around with us, you're like, we found a little bit of sign here, a little bit of sign here, but then like where I killed my deer and then where we were where you killed your deer, like there was sign, and like I guarantee you that there was like a lot of sign, and it was funny. Like the one day, like in our conversation, like you and I'm like, that's the cliche thing of like saying like, oh, that's the hot sign. But I think, and when you talk about like the gray light stuff and it's again, like kind of like a cliche thing, but I think that the hunting public has shown you a little bit of like, you can just go wander around, and as long as you're purposeful, you can find deer and, get in and have an opportunity. But like where I killed that buck, I felt like that was like what Alex Chop was talking about, like where there was like the line of rubs, like saying, hey, this is the caution tape. Hey, this is my area. This is what's going on here. And I think that that's the difference between like just going and killing deer, because you kill deer. I mean, that's not the thing, but it's like going in and like trying to find, like Eric's never killed a doe, so he wasn't going down there to kill does, right?
Right.
So
yeah, I can definitely see the rub thing. Hunting with you guys on the rub thing, I've noticed in recent, months, years, however, a lot of these podcast guys that post are saying ignore the rubs. Rubs don't mean anything. Rubs are just territorial sign. They don't mean anything. They don't show anything. They don't whatever. And then going in with you guys and what Alex had said, I beg to differ. I feel like now I feel like I have a little bit of a different lease on what a rub necessarily means, and not just a rub, not just, hey, this is a line of rub, or there's 2 or 3 rubs in a spot and then you move on, and then a little while later you find a scrape or something like that. And even when I scouted that spot we ended up hunting, I was walking up that one logging road or whatever you want to call it, and there was like 6, 8, 10 scrapes in a row, and then it changed to rubs, and I stopped because I thought I was out of the sign when I got into the rub. And now I'm kind of on the back end feeling like maybe I should have kept going. And I feel like it'll probably change back into that more, I don't want to call it intense, but the more fresh, more purposeful sign than what I thought was just, some random rub. But when you're walking up a logging road and there's rubs on either side of the road near you, I feel like you're starting to get into kind of what we ended up hunting that day you killed your buck.
Well, and I think, when I was up in the UP with Frank, I set a camera for my dad, and I just always remember like Byron Horton, the Whitetail Experience, like his take on rubs, and like what I think he said it like best, or he explained it in a way that made sense to me, is like you look for those rubs leading up. As soon as they get to like the really thick stuff, like that's when you kind of got to stop, like as the rubs go and then they get more frequent, and then it gets super thick, like you're kind of right on the edge of it. And I set a camera for my dad in a spot that it was just that was exactly it. It was just like this concentration of rubs going into this thick stuff. And it's just been bucks running back and forth, running does and everything, like right along that edge. And I feel like that's kind of like where we were at, where the first time that all 3 of us hunted that. Well, I guess let's go back to like where we started. So when that first day when we boated across, Brad, you ended up killing 2 deer, but we just climbed and got to the top of this ridge or mountain peninsula, whatever you'd call it. I don't know what that feature was, because it was really wide. It was a couple 100 yards wide. But I had some pins there, and I think Eric had some pins up there, and we said, all right, well, we're just going to split up, and I guess for Eric and I, that's a regular, normal thing. Like Brad, what was that like for you? Like, because when you came to the Patreon hunt, you're like, okay, I'm just hunting with my buddies. Like, we're going to hunt 10 feet away from each other.
Right. And and I've said it before on the podcast that like, I've never hunted with people. Right. So like it's mostly been just me, or, my dad would drop me off here, and then, he'd go 400, 500, 600 yards away and he'd set up over here, or just, that's the kind of hunting we did. We never like, we didn't do, especially if I don't want to call it say adults, but like, from 16 on, when I didn't have to have somebody glued to my hip to be legal, Dad just dropped you off and went somewhere. And that was kind of how it always was. We never sat together. And then that first year I sat, in the same tree with three people, and it again, really, changed my opinion on that whole aspect. And then this year, hunting with Robbie and Ben, we kind of did what we did this weekend or this last week. And, we sat the same spot, but we were spread out over, 50, 60, 70 yards in between us. So coming to do that with you guys, again, it was, you guys had a plan, right? Like you guys knew where you wanted to go. And I was just, like I kept saying, I'm out with my dad and my uncle, and I'm just trying to figure out, where to fall in line here. And, that first morning we were all together, Eric was like, hey, I want to go down here. I think there's I want to go check out this tip of this peninsula thing. You were like, hey, I got a pin right here in the middle of this real thick shit. I want to go to that. And I was like, all right, he's going right. You're going up the middle. I guess I'm going left. And, working my way up through that edge and eventually finding those rubs and setting up on what I recognized very quickly was, not necessarily a core area or a feeding area, but a really good transition area in between 2 or 3 different features. And ultimately it paid off, seeing 6 deer that morning.
Well, that's the thing is so day before when we were scouting, we're driving around scouting, we meet Brad at the boat launch, and I'm like, there's a freaking boat exactly where we want to go. And so Eric and I go for a walk, kick up some deer, and then it's freaking the Wild West. There's shooting everywhere. And we end up seeing those guys at the boat ramp. They're going back and forth or whatever. And I said, Eric, pull down there and say, hey, are you guys hunting there all week? Because we're going to go there tomorrow. And those guys were like, yeah, we shot 2. You can hunt there tonight if you want to. We're done. So, okay. And so the next morning we go in there. And like you said, Eric went to the end. I went to the middle. And I walked into my pin, essentially. I was maybe 50, 60 yards off, but I found a scrape right in the middle of this saddle, kind of exactly where I thought it was going to be, where on the map there should be something good. And hell, I wasn't even set up. And Eric's like, I've already seen 6 small buck, and they ran right underneath my tree and all this stuff. And I'm like, holy shit, And so Eric, you going in there, what was your, because you got to understand, Eric, we'll get to it in a minute, but Eric's always been the boat guy. He's the walk in, I'm going to figure it out. Not going to be a big deal. And, we get there, and it wasn't any sort of conversation. We're like, okay, we're looking at the map, and Eric's like, I'm going this way. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go. It was the same thing as Brad. I was like, okay, well, I got a pin right here in the middle, so I'll go here. And I'm kind of, telling Brad, showing him on the map, hey, this is why I want to go here. This is, and everything else in a lot of the places that we were hunting, the map showed it as all monoculture woods. It was all, the same leaf cover. And this at least had some diversity. So that's why I wanted to get in there, because it looked different, and deer are edge creatures. So I figured they'd be doing something different. And there was a saddle there. But for you, Eric, when you're I'm going to the right, where did you set up? Because I never even saw where you set up. What made you set up where you did? And I mean, obviously the deer were running over you.
So, yeah, I went to the right, and I had a pin over there, but I didn't even actually get to it, because once I got in there, I seen good sign before that pin. And I typically, when I go into a place that I haven't been, I kind of stage hunt in. So I got in, and there was that thick edge, 10 yards from the end of the ridge that we had climbed, right? There was a logging road on the edge right up top. And then there was a thick edge, and I went through that thick edge, and then it dropped down, and I was kind of on a saddle, and there was a high point on that corner up there. So I thought maybe the deer would skirt that edge So I sat up so I could shoot the logging road that we walked in on once we got up top. And then I also wanted to be able to shoot down into the thicker cover below me, but I was on a saddle. And I thought maybe the deer would come around there and cut that corner, because that corner was a high spot on the end of that peninsula. And that's exactly what they did. And I wasn't even all the way set up yet. And I heard crashing, and I had 4 doe run under me. And I grabbed my bow and got ready because I figured they were being chased. And a couple minutes later, I heard some more crashing. So I actually pulled back, and it was 2 more doe that ran right under my tree. I think one of them actually kicked my stick because I was only 2 sticks high. So I left one on the ground because there was just no cover. The trees there are all mostly have like no cover. They're just straight trees. So I didn't get very high because I didn't want to get out of the, be hanging out in the middle of nowhere up there. So I pulled back, and them 2 ran right under me and went to my right. And when I let down, my cam actually sucked my pants in a little bit. And I was dealing with that. And then, and then about 5 minutes later, 3-point came in on that doe trail. So I'm guessing he was the one pushing him around. And I actually could have got a shot at him. I watched him for a couple minutes. And at this time, I still hadn't been all set up. The camera arm was still in the bag. My gear hanger was still in the bag. Like, I wasn't set up at all. Like, I had my platform up and my bow up. That was it. And then I don't know if it was like 20 or 30 minutes later, I had a little 1-inch spike come in on the same trail, and he actually picked me right off and turned around and ran towards you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I was just barely getting up in the tree. I think I got everything set up and like pulled my phone out, and Eric's like, already seen 6, and I was like, Jesus Christ! Like, but one thing that I think that we didn't touch on, like, we access from this way because of the wind, and so we got to the edge, climbed all the way to the top, and our wind was just blowing straight off into the lake or bayou. I don't know what the hell all these little things we were crossing are called, because we were like in this big system. But regardless, every single day that we were there, the wind was out of a different direction. It was like there was zero consistency in the wind. And I think that played a big part into like how and where we were hunting. And being out on this peninsula, like why it was okay to be like right on that logging road or right near that logging road is because those deer had every advantage being right there. They were on the leeward side, and they could get the wind of everything, coming across that peninsula. So we were kind of hugging that edge right there, and it ended up working out. So yeah, I got up and I had a doe and a fawn come through, and then I had that spike that picked Eric off come running by me, and then I think it was the same doe and fawn come around, and Brad's sending all these texts, and all this stuff is all happening like in the middle of everything, and so I'm just going like, holy crap, because I mean, Eric and I have hunted all over, and Eric's always been like in deer. He, notoriously had his tree stand in his hand when 2 really nice bucks walked right underneath him, like when he should have been set up. He missed one in Missouri, shot a tree. Didn't see a single deer in Ohio in 2 trips. Passed on a little buck in Indiana. So Eric's always, in the deer. Me, it's like hit or miss. I'll see one here and there. And so Brad, you had to like, Dad told you to boat over there. Uncle Eric said, I'm going out here to not shoot any deer. You're on your own. And so you get set up on where you get set up, and how did that morning go for you?
Yeah, so I may have already been up. I want to say I was up when I got the text from Eric, but I was I think 3 full sticks up. Uh, but I was stepping up onto my platform. I had just set my platform and I looked up and I saw a deer and I was like, oh shit. And at that point, the fog had started coming in. And where I was sitting, the sun was like super glaring to my left and it made that fog just impossible. So I think that gave me a little bit of an edge, just that I was kind of on the shadowy side of the tree and was able to step up onto the platform. And I still just had my lineman's on. I was trying to figure out how to swing just right to get my bow drawn. I saw antlers. I wasn't sure how big, but I knew it was a buck. And it ended up it was either a like a 3 point or a full 4 point four corner or whatever. And it came in, and I mean, it gave me a show. It walked around at 20 yards, gave me plenty of chances. And at that point, again, I live here. I still got 2 buck tag state, but like, not being out of state, you got a little bit of standards in your pocket like you would at home, if you were in Michigan. And I decided to let him walk, stepped up, locked in, and I don't know. I think that's really when the text started flying. And I happened to look up, and right down the edge there was a real big thicket in between me and Adam. And you could tell it was a really hard transition. And right on the corner of that, between the logging road and that thicket, was 2 really big rubs on cedar trees. So I knew I needed to be able to shoot that, and then I needed to be able to shoot the logging road, and just kind of worked out real well the tree I was in. I was in some pretty good, cover. And I look up, I see 2 doe working their way, and then they're on my weak side, they're on the right side. They start coming up over towards, like they're either gonna head towards Adam or they're gonna walk out in front of me at 30 yards where this little fence piece was. And they ended up changing their mind completely. I don't know if the wind switched and they caught Adam's wind or how that worked out, but they completely did a 90-degree turn and ended up walking the logging road down straight in front of me. And I shot the first one at 20 yards. And while I'm, trying to take pictures and Snapchats and double along her, she piles up. I don't know. It was a total maybe 60, 70 yards she went. But, from the tree, she died 40 yards from me. Um, so her falling kind of worked up. I'm watching her. I'm trying to send the Snapchats and the text, move the cameras around, do the interviews, do all that kind of stuff. And I kind of looked down to my left, and again, it was super thick. Anytime I tried to range anything, I got 7 yards over and over again. It's all my rangefinder would say. And I looked down in the fog, and I see a flag go up. I'm like, oh, shit. And there was a doe that had, after watching Insta 360 footage, I saw had come down from the opposite direction, up the bottom, kind of where the buck had gone down into. And she was at 20 yards. And by the time I got my bow and stuff off there, she had taken off. I was like, well, okay, that'll work out. Like, 1 deer down, I'm texting you guys. And shortly after that, the fawn works her way back around and ends up like coming over to sniff the mom. And I judged her at about 35. And, obviously real distance was about 40. So I held low at 35 and let it rip, and it ended up going like it either hit her in the calf or just kind of grazed her calf. There was a little bit of white hair at the spot, but definitely not anything that, was going to be fatal by any means. And she took off. So I was like, oh shit, I've sent 2 arrows. And I think that's when we started texting Adam, like, I've already shot a deer. I got a deer down. I got 2 arrows loose. And so day kind of goes on. We're texting back and forth. And I look up, and again, from the bottom, here comes this other doe. And she came in at about 40, stopped broadside. And at this time I had a range, stopped broadside, and I let it go. I held low. Shot was a little right of where I was holding, but still was holding that low third of that front shoulder, and it went right in front of her body, as you can kind of see on the video I posted last night. And she takes like 3 yards, turns around, looks at me, hangs out for a minute. I knock another arrow, and she steps back into the same hole, just this time quartering to instead of broadside. And I put that through her left front shoulder, and she runs down and falls 40 yards away. Maybe a total of 60, 70 yards she ran. So at this point, I got 2 deer down. Eric's got scene 6, past the buck, and Adam's texting back and forth, whatever. And then the only other deer I saw was a small spike stood up in between me and Adam, and I thought it was going to work his way. It ended up working back around me, and then when these two guys got down, they ended up pushing that spike back out in front of me again, and I passed him ultimately. But it was a pretty eventful morning for the complete randomness of throwing a dart at the wall and finding a spot.
Well, and that's kind of like the fun part, in that I think that's where I wanted to get your take on it, because like it's your home state, right? And this is your home turf, and we're like, this is where we're gonna go in the dark, and we're gonna figure it out. And then Eric's got deer running all over, and you shot 2 deer, and you're like, if this keeps up, we're gonna need a bigger boat. And I was like, because I had an earbud in, so it was just reading me the text, and I'm going like, what the hell is he talking about? And it says Brad sent a picture of some woods in a circle, and it was his site housing, and there was a dead deer laying there, but the AI or whatever couldn't pick that up. So I was like, what the hell? It's like he's just like, oh, it's a beautiful morning. I'm not seeing the dead deer laying there. So he's like, I'm going to need a bigger boat. Like, I'm going to need to move her. And I'm like, I'm thinking that he's just like missing letters or like typing stuff. And I'm like, what the hell, And then Eric gets down, and he's like, oh man, we were off by like, you got down, we were going to get down at 10, and you walked like the whole end of that peninsula, and like, what was the sign like up there?
Yeah, so I got down mainly because my wind switched, and now like the whole time we were down there, I feel like the wind was always switching and moving on us. But I thought, well, maybe I could, maybe push something off the end of that peninsula towards you guys. So I got down, and I didn't even see it from my tree, but I walked 20 yards, and there was a big old rub on a cedar tree closer to the end of that peninsula. And when I got to the end of the peninsula, there was a bunch of briar and stuff before it dropped off that backside back down to the water there. And I found a big old bed over there, which I'm assuming was a buck bed. And then I circled around and dropped down to where I had actually had a pin. And that's where all the sign was. There was a bunch of rubs down there and scrapes. And it was actually like between where I was set up and Adam was set up. And that's where everything came together. And I probably should have been hunting, but being the first sit and never being in there, like I usually, like I said, set up kind of conservative and move my way in. But I don't think I ended up kicking up anything to you guys.
And ultimately, we never went back and hunted that because of the wind and just the way that the access was. And so we end up going, and like, sure shit, Brad's got 2 deer dead, and we had to take care of those, and got to boat one out. And for me, I want to touch on like the aspect of like hunting from like the kayaks, right? Because Brad has done it before, like that's part of his regimen down there. And we had 3 very different vessels. So I had the Water Feather, which is like a duck hunting boat, essentially, that they've kind of repurposed or showed the benefits of being able to hunt deer out of it, because it's wide and it drafts really well. It's pretty light. And then Brad has like an Ascend 10T, like nice, higher end kayak. And then Eric, how would you describe your vessel? Because I don't want to like insult anybody.
Oh, go ahead. I mean, it's the cheapest. It's the cheapest fishing kayak I could find. It was like $150 or $200, I think. And yeah, it was the smallest of the 3 vessels and probably the sketchiest. And I had used it to scout before, but I've never actually, like, I tried to hunt out of it one time during rifle season with my rifle, and I put it in the water on this creek actually, and started paddling. And then I realized I didn't have my life jacket, so I ended up just pulling out and going back home that day. But after that, I was like, man, screw that thing. It's just too sketchy. Like I just was not comfortable in it at all.
And so going into this, like I had never like kayaked in for deer hunting, and I was like, I want to be able to. Well, on the way down there, I was like, what are our goals? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, I want to boat one out with this thing, you know, and see, like, test it out, see how it works. We had it up at the Patreon hunt like the first day when like nobody was really up there. Eric was up there, and we drug it down to the lake, and I put a trolling motor in it, and I was standing up, you know, paddling it around like a paddle board and using the kayak paddle, and put the trolling motor in there and zipping around. And then we had 2 full-size adults in it zipping around, and you guys are all laughing at us, but it was cool. So that kind of like beefed up my confidence a little bit. But like around here, like what I think of is like, it's always hunting the river. So it's always like moving water. And I mean, and Eric and I have hunted out of a canoe there, and it was like, we've had mixed results. Like some days it was okay. And then like the one time we were like literally trolling motor going, rowing, and we got like 100 yards in like 30 minutes. And we were like, we're just going to have to get out and walk. Cause it was just, we were getting nowhere. So like, that didn't really build my confidence for like, oh, I'm going to go out. And I mean, like floating the river is like a thing around here as far as like in the summertime, getting the kayaks, getting the tubes, you know, so I've been down the river 100 times in a kayak. But like to think about like putting all your gear on there, all that stuff, and like flipping over, you think of all the worst things, you know, you roll it, you lose your cameras, Brad. Well, Brad, you've flipped your kayak with all your shit on it. Like, what goes through your head at that point?
Oh shit was the number one thing that went through my head. But luckily I was like 6 feet from the bank, but in that one spot, it drops down like to 9-10 feet. Like you're standing in ankle deep water, and the next step you are gone. Like there's a sharp drop off right there. And I was just telling somebody at work the other day about, you know, what we've been doing about flipping the kayak. And I remember when I opened my eyes as I was like going down, right? Like I had my little inflatable vest on, so like I could have popped it, but that was my first thought. And then like I remember looking up and my wallet was floating at me, and I was like, oh fuck. And I snagged my wallet, and then my next option was GoPro or main camera. And I was like, fuck. And I thought too long, and by then it had washed out. My feet hit the bottom. As soon as my feet hit the bottom, I shot back up, and then ultimately ended up having to go out and like put my face up in the air, like so just my nose or my mouth would be out of the water, and I felt around with my foot until I found both those cameras. And obviously the main camera's trashed. It's over here somewhere behind me. GoPro, you know, works fine. It's waterproof or whatever. But luckily it was like October 10th or 12th. It was 90 degrees out. Again, I'm wearing, you know, rubber boots, you know, knee high boots. So I dumped all that shit out, and it was kind of like, well, do I go to the house or do I just go hunt? And I ended up just going out there and hanging and dripping dry that night. But definitely did not want to do that with the water temperatures that we had last week, because even though it wasn't super frigid out, that water was still quite cool compared to the, you know, probably 75 or 80 degree temperatures I dumped my boat in.
Yeah, so Brad has done this before. He's got a, you know, pretty, I would say, like sound regimen. And Eric and I were trying to figure out like where are we going to hook our bows up. Where in my boat, you know, I could have taken all of our gear and without any sort of problem. So you get those deer cut up and throw Brad's in the front. So Brad had one on his boat. I had one in my boat with all my stuff, and I had plenty of room. I could have taken them both. And Eric was like, no, I'll let you guys take that.
Eric didn't have room for his bow, let alone a deer.
But it was cool to see like the differences in them and like how it worked. And so I was like, well, I got to boat out a deer. Like, now let's see if we can do it for me. And I was considering shooting a doe, because it wasn't like that was the thing about hunting there. There was no like, I didn't feel like, it wasn't like you were going to burn a tag. It was like every day you went to sleep, like your bank account got reset with does. So it was like, well, we'll see what comes by. But the next morning, the wind was wrong, and it was way steeper on the other side to get where we had planned on going. So we look at the map. There's another boat launch. So we go to the other boat launch, and we looked at the map. And what was really cool, and I don't, again, Brad, I think for all the guys in the Patreon group, Brad talks a big game, and he's like, yeah, this is what I do. Kill all these deer, like all the deer, German Shepherd size. Just so, don't get me wrong here, but he was saying, well, I don't like really e-scout the same way that you guys do. So on Spartan Forge, you flip that over to LiDAR, and you can see a lot. Like it'll tell you, like it may sound like when you hear us talk about it, or you hear Spartan Forge talk about it, you see their posts or whatever, that it's like lip service, that is like, oh, look at what it can do, like how cool this is or whatever. But it's real. And when you're e-scouting like that, especially in a spot that you've never been, when you look at it and when you have the leaf on cover and everything looks the same, and you switch to LiDAR, now you can see trails up there. And whether those are logging roads or deer trails or whatever they are, but it gives you like a starting point. So we have to go around to the other side. I look on where I want to go, and we have like a plan. There's 2 saddles up there. There's food plots on the private that's on the backside of this. And there's logging roads, deer trails. There's marks in the LiDAR that all kind of like converge on both of these saddles coming from those food plots. So that would make you think that was deer trails. We get over there, we unload all of our stuff, Eric and I, and we're like, where the heck is Brad? He can't find the boat launch. In comes these guys from East Tennessee with a full-on John boat. And so we're like, where are you guys going? They're like, we're going to this place my buddy pinned, blah, blah, blah. Exact same spot as we were going. We're like, okay, well, that's where we're going too. And they're like, well, yeah, whatever. And they had a faster boat, so they got to hunt there. So Eric was going to a different spot anyways. I think you had planned on, I don't know if you were going to go up there with us, or because we didn't know if Brad was going to hunt. That's what it was. So Brad and I were going to go.
I was already kind of planning on going to where I went anyways, but
yeah. So Brad and I were
all that went down.
Yeah, Brad and I were going to go up to that top. And so we ended up having to go into the next inlet. And I think maybe this is kind of like what you were alluding to also, Brad, at least when we were talking on the phone. We went in there at gray light, and like the hills in Tennessee were way different than the hills in Ohio. Like the ones in Ohio were like bigger, steeper, and the deer we weren't, I guess, granted, we weren't around water when we were in Ohio. So maybe that played into why they were using these a little bit differently, but needless to say, Brad and I went in at gray light, found some terrain features, went up there, and neither one of us found anything. And then Brad and I just scouted around to see if there was anything up there that was worth hunting or needed to come back to, and didn't really find anything. But we checked out all these different drainages, and I was kind of showing Brad at least like my thought process, or like our thought process as we go into these things. And he's like, there is no way I would ever hunt this. Like I would never walk in here. And so like for you, Brad, like a guy who always wants to be set up like well before and feel like you gotta hunt and all that stuff. Like what was that morning like for you?
Yeah, so we go in, we start first off, step off the boat. First foot off is good solid land. Next foot, I'm knee deep in water. Oh shit. So started with that. Tried to take some pictures of somebody using the bathroom. We'll keep that, whatever. And then we went in. And So we go up in, and Adam's talking about these drainages and the way the deer are going to move through the drainages. And the entire time, I'm like, this dude has no idea. Like, he's about to figure out that this is not how you got to hunt down here. Like, it's not going to work. And I am definitely a top third guy. Um, I see most of the action on top of ridges or that top third, depending on which way the wind's blowing. Um, Anytime I've hunted down here, that has been my go-to, right? And after all the stuff we did that morning, now I'm like, man, I wonder how many deer I'd missed. Like, and
seeing what Adam and obviously you're listening to a podcast, right? So if you're hearing me talk right now, you're tuned into this. You hear all these guys talk about the thermal hubs and the ways that deer move through these hills and these terrain features and the way the wind moves and how you should set up on the end of this or that. And none of that like made any sense to me. Like I remember looking on a map and thinking, right there, that's a thermal hub. I can tell you that's it. And boy, was I wrong. That was just a spot where the wind swirled. That was not a thermal hub. So like that morning we go up this drainage, and like Adam said, we're really not seeing any sign. There's not a whole lot of anything one way or the other. There's no big trails. There's nothing that's making us think like this is the spot. So we find a little, like he said, 2 saddles. We got to go, straight up to get to them. We pop up on top about the same time. He finds a couple rubs down in the drainage he's in. I follow a deer trail up. I'm like, this is it. Like, this is going to work. I popped up. I found like a smaller, like, I didn't want to call it a saddle, but like a smaller drainage that was only on LiDAR. It wasn't on the regular map. Even the topo really didn't show it. And as I followed up some like smaller rubs or older historical type rubs, I got to the top. I found a couple little rubs, but I could tell like there was rubs to my left, rubs to my right. So like I just need to sit here in the middle if I'm going to set up. And I walked over to this tree and I was standing there and I was like, man, I just don't like where I'm at. Like this is a spot 100% of the time before this last week I would have set up in. No 2 questions asked. I'd have hung out there, and I probably would have saw that doe or whatever blew at me had I just picked the tree and set up like I normally would have. So I get my first stick on, and I'm starting to like take my platform and shit out of my pack to get it on my saddle, get everything set up to go. And I was like, man, this is not what we've talked about. We've talked about finding the hot sign, working the right sign, not setting up just to set up, setting up with purpose. So I take the stick down, and when I do that, something blows at me. God only know what it was, but something blew at me from farther out down the little like ridge I was on. So I'm texting you. I'm like, I'm not really seeing anything. I'm going to work my way to the other side of the saddle. So I work through the saddle. I come up the other side. Again, historical rubs, couple older rubs, nothing screaming like this is where I need to be. Pop out a little bit farther. I found an older scrape, a lot of leaves in it. Hadn't been checked in a few days, maybe a week. I don't know. With all the rain, you'd assume it had been, I don't know. It looked like it had been there a while. So I'm like, I should sit up here. And I'm like, nope, this isn't it. You got to keep moving. So I move out. I find one more random little scrape on the edge of this peninsula. I end up texting you. I go all the way out to the end of this ridge, and there is like thick grass, like good green grass, like just looks like they would bed out there, and they are at, literally a point. Like they can't get, nothing can come from them from any direction other than the direction I just came. So it's a perfect spot for deer to set up in bed and be safe. There's good cover. There was feed trees, oaks in there, and you walk up in an area with a bunch of grass and oak, full acorns sitting there, and like not just caps, not crushed up. You're like, they're not here. Like if they were here, this would all be, feed sign. It would all be crushed up. There'd be prints, there'd be tracks, there'd be shit. It was just nothing. So we ended up coming back together in between where the two of us went up and working our way back down to the drainage. And that's where Adam proceeded to take me to school and show me all the ways I was wrong over the last few years and what I thought and how absolutely, completely wrong I was.
Well, that wasn't like, you make that sound like I'm like, A, know what I'm talking about, and B, that like, I was saying like, no, you're wrong. I was just saying like, look. So I went up on my side, and both of us, like that upper third was rubbed up. We both followed rub lines up to exactly where we popped over. And I found like 1 or 2 fresh rubs and a very, very fresh scrape. Dirt still on the leaves and everything, but it was just like one of those moving scrapes. There was no like, it wasn't like a historical scrape. There wasn't a big licking branch. There wasn't anything. It was just like a frustrated deer. And following it all the way up, same thing Brad said, there just wasn't like the deer. I didn't feel like the deer were going to come back through there. Like they used that as a travel route, but it wasn't anywhere where they were like, that wasn't their like core area, I guess is the best way to put it. So we walked down, and I think what Brad's talking about is, I was saying, like, this was like one of those drainages that went off into like 2 or 3 different drainages. And it was like, well, every time we got to where this like the ends you would call like a thermal hub, or like in Ohio, there would be a community scrape there, like a big community scrape. It was very predictable. And that really wasn't the case so much here. And I think it's just because the deer weren't using it in the same way, and that water might have had something to do with it, because they can't go up one drainage over and then up another drainage just down the logging road or whatever, like they could in Ohio or wherever. Like the system wasn't that big because we were out on the peninsula. But every time we got to where the drainage began, there was a rub there, and they were just marking doe trails. And then we just went up each one of them to check. And I was telling Brad, I'm like, we were standing there in the middle, and there's like a couple rubs, and I'm like, so this is how they're going to move through here. And this is why, like, this is how that's supposed to work. And there's some big old rubs in the one. And I'm like, there should be a scrape like right here. And how mhas this happened to us, Eric? Like, you get to the end of one of those things and you're like, there should be a scrape here. And all you got to do is like look around for like 2 minutes, and it's like, okay, there it is right there. And Brad's like, there's no fucking way. Like, why? How? You know?
It's all like rocky and shit. Like, I'm like, there's no like definitive, like, normally you get that like real nice looking branch tree coming out. Like, no, it's just a pile of rocks. And Adam's like, there's a scrape right here. I'm like, you're full of shit, dude. There ain't no scrape here. And then, oh, there it is right there, 5 yards from us.
Tine marks in it, like the whole thing. And it wasn't fresh. Like, it wasn't like super fresh, but it was there. And I mean, and so like when Eric and I go like out of state, like those, I mean, and this isn't like new, like novel information, like you're saying, like if you're tuned into like the podcast and stuff, but Eric and I had the conversation like on the way down, like you can listen to this stuff all day long, but until you go out there and check all those drainages and see it for yourself, and then you can start to hone in on like what's really happening and like how how they're using it. So like while we're doing this, like what's going on your side of the island there, Eric?
Yeah, so I opted to go stay low, and at the end of that lake or whatever that thing is, I'm not even sure. A creek runs off of it, and there's a bunch of drainages that drop down there and a logging road and stuff. So I actually had a pin back in there that was probably, I don't know, where's that pin at? 500-600 yards in, probably
600 yards.
So I had that pin 600 yards in. So I'm thinking, well, that's where I'm going to go. And as soon as I parked my kayak and got off, got my backpack on, grabbed my bow, and turn around, start walking, there's a rub on the tree right there. Like, not like a super fresh rub, but, from this year. And I thought, well, that's cool. There's already sign. I just got here. So I start walking in more, and I'm finding more and more rubs. And I only went probably 200 yards, I think. And there's a smaller drainage system that drops in right there. And it, like, that looked good. All the sign was good. There was rubs, everything. After I got down from the morning hunt. I did some more scouting there, and I actually found the scrape right where it should have been, but it was dark, so I couldn't see it. I was about 40 yards from it. So I set up, got up the tree, and I don't think it was, man, it was, I don't even know if I had all my stuff set up that morning. I don't even know if I had the camera arm on the tree yet or not, but I seen something move, and it was a pretty nice buck. It dropped down that drainage, and with the wind, it made perfect sense for him to. There's a logging road that runs at the bottom of those drainages across them, and he dropped down on that logging road and was just cruising the bottom of all those drainages right there. And the wind was, he was just checking for does. The wind was right in his face, off all the tops, down all the drainages, right to him. And I tried like grunting and bleating, and he just didn't respond at all. I don't know if he couldn't hear me. He was about 100 yards away when I first seen him, and he was just nose to the ground moving. So I was like, well, that's cool. And I don't think I seen anything up top that morning. That was a different sit. But I did end up seeing some deer to my right, about 125 yards out. Oh, that's right. There was so I was sitting there after I seen that buck. And it was probably a half hour later, and I heard some grunting and crashing, and I had what I assumed was a buck chase a doe behind me, but I couldn't see it go through, and they were crashing through, and they went out kind of on this peninsula where the lake ends and the creek runs through there. And then about an hour, I think it was about 9:00. So probably about an hour after I heard that, I seen a smaller buck over there and some does moving around, and I grunted at that one too, but he wouldn't come in either. So it was I didn't have any deer in range, but it was a pretty successful morning as far as getting in there. I didn't end up going to that pin that I wanted to, but the sign was there, so I set up there.
And so that evening, like, we reconvene, and Brad and I are like, this sucks. And Eric's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. And mind you, this whole time, Eric has no service. Like, Eric has like the Flintstone phone or something where there's like a bird that like zero service, like nothing. And so me and Brad are like, what, is Eric dead? Like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I seen 3 bucks and 6 does, and like, yeah, again, he's the boat access guy, right? So he's, every time he freaking parks the boat, like, deer are like, oh yeah, there he is. Like, he can't fit us on that boat anyway, so it's fine. So
yeah, for some reason, the whole time we were down there, unless I was on top of a ridge, I had 0 cell service, like 0.
So we're like, all right, we're going back in there. And so Eric's like, well, I'm going to make a move. I'm going to move up a little bit. And so Eric's like, Brad, are you going to hunt with me? And Brad's like, nope, I'm following Adam. So we go down there. And it's probably had to have been close to where you had seen those deer down there, because you'd walk down there and you saw there was logging road and a hiking trail and all this other stuff.
Right.
So we get to that end, and I'm like, man, I think because we had a good wind, I was like, I think that this is going to be like, this corner, I think, is a good spot for a buck checking like that peninsula, like back in where that buck had run them does. I'm like, I think this is a good spot. And I'm like, Brad, all right, son, right here, like, find a tree right in here. I'm going to go that way. And where I wanted to go, where I had a pin also, Eric had a pin up there, it just looked really, really open. So like, made this, like, there was another drainage that came down, drainage system, but it was just really open between Brad and up there. And what we didn't realize at the time is that because of the way that the terrain laid out, like, you couldn't see up there. It was a really gradual slope, and then it dipped down past that. So you couldn't see what was going up there, because Eric's like, why aren't you seeing these deer? Like, there's deer coming from like right over where you guys are. And so I didn't go up to my pin because I was like, well, Brad's just going to be looking at me. I'm just going to be looking at Brad. So I just worked my way down to this edge, and there was a giant rub on the cedar tree. I seen a couple fresh rubs, and I'm like, I'm going to get to this corner because it was like a 3-way corner. And then looking on the map, there was actually a finger of the public that went out right up against, like, the neighbor had food plots and all sorts of stuff. So I was like, well, this is going to be as good a spot as any. And it was really close, but it wasn't the right spot. So I just sit in there and I got nothing. I got just looking at blue jays all day. But Eric, you had more deer. Brad should have shot a deer in there, I think.
Yeah, I had deer, that small buck, chasing does all over up top above me. And I don't even know how many deer I seen that night. 6 or 7, probably. I don't know. They were all over up there, chasing around and going crazy.
And then
I had 2 in between, I guess, me and Adam, and then I probably should have. I was worried. I was texting Adam. I was like, man, Eric found a spot. I don't want to come in here and shoot a doe and mess it up. Like, y'all are out of state. Adam's like, I was like, you need to send it. And I was like, oh, shit. So this doe comes down, and she had to have got to Adam's ground set and just turned on a dime and headed that direction. And I like immediately went out of kill mode and went into, holy crap, my buddy is like going to get a deer. And I could have shot her at probably 25 yards right there. And I let her go, and I let her because I thought she was headed straight for Adam. And little did I know there were 2 of them, and they milled around there behind me for a minute. And then right at last light, there was like, we were discussing getting down, and I turned and I could hear them coming, but the way this tree was set up, I just could not like see where they were at, if that makes sense. Like where I was sitting to my left, there was still decent light, but it was like a cedar thicket to my right, so I just couldn't see in there well enough to know, but I knew they were on top of me. And at the last second, I looked at my watch, and I'm like, all right, I got 2 minutes of legal light. Like, I need to make a decision. Again, weak side shot. I need to make a decision if they're going to come to I guess, my left side of the tree or my right side of this tree. And I picked left and stayed where I was at. And if I had picked right, I'd have probably got a shot off.
And then you spooked them, and they came running over to me, and they milled around behind me for a while, but it was so dark I could hear them, but I couldn't see them. And they never blew or anything. They just wandered off. So another exciting night. Kayak back over there. Brad had to work the next day or something, or you had something to do with your kids. So Eric and I are like, well, tomorrow it's a 9,000% chance of rain at 11 o'clock. So we're going to go in there. Still got a good wind. I set up where Brad set up. Eric, I think you made like a slight adjustment. Well, it started raining at 9 o'clock. And it didn't just start raining like, oh, it's just going to rain a little bit. It started freaking pouring. And so I can't text Eric. He's got no service. So I'm just like sitting there waiting for 10 o'clock. And then finally 10 o'clock comes and I get down. He comes over. But and this is kind of like what we kind of were talking about a little bit earlier is like, Brad said he couldn't see it from the tree. I was sitting in the same tree that Brad was in the night before, and there was a huge rub, like right in front of me that I'm like, I was looking at it through the binoculars, and I'm like, it was so hard because everything was wet because it was raining. I was like, that's got to be a big rub. So, and I don't know if that happened like in the interim, but Eric and I like walked over there, saw the rub. We walked up. I mean, we couldn't walk 10 feet in there without running into another fresh rub, like from the past couple days. And we walked to our pin and it's just rubbed up. I mean, again, it's like the Alex Chop freaking caution tape. I mean, the whole straight across that open area was rubs, and it went right up to the thick edge up there, right where this thing came, one of the ridges came down. We're standing right where there should be a scrape. Took us 2 minutes, look around. Oh, there's the scrape.
There's the scrape.
Yep. And so we're soaked to the bone. We have to now paddle back across in the kayaks. Our kayaks are just, collecting rainwater. And so we're like, screw this. We go back. We're just going to hang out for a couple hours. And then we're like, all right, we're going to go scout around. At least we can drive around in glass. We can do something. And this right here will tell you like the kind of like mindset that Eric has as far as like water access and like what we're doing. So this place that we had been hunting was going to close. So we were like, okay, well, we'll go drive around this other spot and kind of see what's going on over there. So we drive around, we see a couple deer, we see like what they're doing. We decide that they're coming from bedding, going out to food. And we're like, man, it's not raining. What should we do? Let's try and walk out there just so we can glass. We'll grab the decoy, maybe rattle. We'll see what's going on. Walk out there. Ditch. Can't do it. So like, all right, well, it looks like we can get over there. We walk down this thing. Ditch. Walk. Okay, well, maybe we can go down there. And these are ditches that we can't cross. And it's been raining. Like I said, the whole time that we were going to be down there, it was going to rain in some way, shape, or form. And it had rained leading up to us getting down there. So Eric's like, let's just drive the truck over there and put our kayaks in this ditch. It's like, okay, all right. So we just get in a ditch, kayak down the ditch, and we get all the way down to the end of the ditch, pull the kayaks up, get like halfway across this field, and it starts raining. And we're like, whatever, we're already out here. And we like literally had what? How much time did we have until dark?
Maybe an hour.
Yeah. So we're like, we're going to get up a tree in these tree lines and we're going to glass out there.
Well, yeah. So we seen this tree line and we knew there was a field on the other side of the tree line. So it was kind of like a hidden field. And that's why we were trying to get over there. And we walked for at least 45 minutes before we figured out that we couldn't get over there no matter how we tried. So then I was like, let's just freaking throw the kayaks in this drainage ditch and paddle up between these two cornfields and freaking go check it out. And Adam, he's like, okay. So that's what we did. So we went to just, we're not going to hunt tonight because it's going to rain. We're just going to drive around in glass to throwing our boats in a ditch and paddling up with a decoy and all of our gear. So
then we get out there and like, I'm like not even barely set up and it's freaking pouring and then it starts to lightning and like, it was a ways off. And so I'm like, this is stupid, but it's not, maybe it's not, the wind wasn't blowing that way. Like maybe it's not coming our way. And then it was like lightning. And then it was like thunder and lightning, like right on top of us. And I was like, this is so stupid. And so I'm like trying to text Eric, like if we can get down, but it's raining so hard that my phone won't even pick up any of the taps. And I'm like, this is terrible. And then another lightning bolt like grazed me. And I was like, we're getting down. Like, I'm like, this is so stupid. So I just got down. I like packed up all my stuff. I like walked over and I looked at my phone and then apparently Eric could type and it said, this is stupid. And I was like, I'm not getting struck by lightning. Like we're getting out of here. And so everything that we have is like completely soaked, like to the bone. Like,
yeah, it downpoured. It didn't rain. It freaking downpoured.
And I think that made an impression on Brad because he's like, I need a guy that'll just paddle through a cornfield in a lightning storm.
Yeah, I'm looking. If you're in Middle Tennessee or the Clarksville area, your name may be Eric, may not be Eric. If you're willing to paddle through a cornfield in a thunderstorm, if you're listening to this thinking, man, sounds like a lot of fun, you out. I need Eric. Find me one.
But so and this is like where we had to like make a really hard decision because the next day where we were hunting, like where we found the sign, where everything was going on, the wind was wrong. Like it was 180 degrees wrong. It was blowing like the opposite way. Like we're walking in with the wind to our backs. And like we went back and forth on it pretty good as far as like what were we going to do, and we just decided like we're going to go in there. It's the last day. And the main thing was that we were accessing from the water, and every time that Eric had been in there, the wind didn't play that much of a factor because there was a big pull back towards that water, right?
Yeah. So the 2 mornings that I hunted in there before that, both times so what time did it sit? Like 6 o'clock there is gray light. Like you could actually shoot, I think, at about 6 a.m. And from 6 a.m. to roughly 8 a.m., it didn't seem to matter what the forecasted wind was. It was pulling back to the lake stronger than whatever the wind was supposed to be in that time frame. So we talked about it, and finally we're like, you know what? This is the last day we can hunt in here, and it's going to be closed. The wind is completely wrong, but if it pulls back like it has been for the first 2 hours, let's just go in there. Like, what do we have to lose, right? It's our last day. We blow it out, whatever. You never know what's going to happen. So we went in.
And really, even by the time we went to bed, we didn't even know if Brad was going to be able to hunt, because we were soaking wet. We're like, we're going to bed. He's like, well, maybe I'll go, maybe I won't. Depends on what my wife says. And wake up in the morning and he says, yep, I can go. So that Brad shows up, we go in there, and Eric's like, I'm going to go higher. I tell Brad, okay, this is where you need to go, son. You need to not sit where you were sitting. You need to go, 100 yards straight in front of where you are, basically. And then from there, I'm going to go sit. And I didn't pin the scrape. I had a good idea of like where it was, but I got in there in the dark, and obviously everything looks way different. I'm like, oh shit. Like, so I'm sitting there in gray light going, and we went in there in the dark. We didn't go in there in gray light, and it was like in the dark, and I'm like trying to do it with a headlamp and everything and looking around, and it's like starting to get lighter and lighter. And I'm like, I can see Brad's light over there. I'm like, oh man, I don't think I'm in the right spot. Like I think I even texted you. I was like, I think I need to be higher up. And, so I get set up, and I set up one way, don't like where my platform is, get set up again. And, now my camera, the 360 is like out of arm's reach. It's like way away from me because I hooked it into a tree, because I was in a tree that was like, I don't know, not much bigger than a softball. I don't know. It was a grapefruit sized tree or something, but it had a little bit of cover. Everything, like I said, when we looked at it, when Brad was sitting up there, there was just not, it was just too wide open and it's because there wasn't good trees, or there were just good big pole trees. Like I can see why people like in the South or whatever, they like light their climbers, because there's no shortage of climber trees. Like that's for sure. So
that's what I was telling you, like with that maple tree at the Patreon hunt, that like I just don't hunt that because I don't have that to hunt in. A lot of the times it's just that big, like like you said, I feel like why am I in a saddle to get these benefits of being in a saddle when I could just take a climber in there and sit in the same damn tree, basically.
Yeah. But I got up the tree, and it was like, it was funny because Eric had service that day because he was up on the ridge. So we're texting back and forth, and they're like, I don't know. Brad had seen a deer. He had a deer come in behind him, and he's like, I'm listening to you, blah, blah, blah. And, should be listening to Eric and blah, blah, and I'm like, I was like, don't listen to me, man. I haven't seen a deer. I've only seen deer like the first day. So like, don't listen to me. And, it was like 2 minutes later, I look up, and right over one of those points, here comes a buck. And I just saw that it was a buck, and it had points on it. That wasn't a spike. So I was like, hell yeah. Grab my bow, draw back, and he got like between these like 3 little trees, and I drew back and I had it on him, and I was like, yeah, that's just shooting at like brown. I was like, I'll wait. And he stepped out and he was quartered to me, and I shot, and I swear the arrow looked great. And he tucked his, like he was gut, like I hit him in the guts, like tucked his tail like tight, puckered him up, spun around, and he just kind of like ooched around the inside of that drainage. And I thought he was going to go down right there, and that he didn't. And I was like, what the hell? And then I look through the binoculars and I can see that my arrow's like green, like the white fletching, the reflective wrap is green. And I'm like, this is not go. I didn't see him go down. Like the arrow looked good, but now the arrow looks terrible. And like immediately Brad texted me. He's like, that sounded good. Cause Brad, it turns out, was like, I don't know how close you were to me, probably like in real life, like 80 yards.
Yeah. 75, 80 yards.
Yeah. And he's like, "Ooh, that sounded good." It's like, did that like startle you, or because you didn't see me like shoot or anything?
No, and at that point you said, I can see you. I think you said, I can see you. And I was kind of bobbing and weaving, and I was like, man, I don't want to make too much like moving to looking at him. Like, and I thought you were more to, I guess, my right. You were ended up being almost straight in front of the tree, which is why I couldn't see you. But yeah, you had texted, oh, I ain't seen a deer, blah blah blah. You should listen to Eric. And I mean, like you said, not 3 minutes later, I just hear freaking, and I was like, oh shit, like that sounded really good. And I texted like, that sounded real great. And I'm sure Eric, not seeing or hearing, was in the dark completely as to what was going on again. Like, first time he's got service, still doesn't know what's going on. And I'm like, it sounded good. I was like, buck or doe. And then Eric's like, wait, somebody shoot one? And then Adam's like, small buck. He's like, and then he started telling us about how, arrow looked bad. He felt bad. I was like, man, that sounded like he just, like that good, solid, like drilled the pocket, like diaphragm popping kind of sound.
Yeah, so we're like, what are we going to do? Da 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 da. And we ended up waiting until like 2 hours basically. And then it was ultimately Eric's decision, because it was like, I'm just going to sit here. And, because it was like Eric's spot, and Eric saw the doe that Brad spooked, and he's just like, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. So they got down and came over, and, arrow looked terrible, but there was good blood, followed it. And he only went like 90 yards, and he went right out to that point, and he had his legs tucked under him. He bedded down right on that point, and he was looking back towards whatever bit him. And he was stone dead, like right there. So super cool. Eric and I, we've been on lots of adventures and never killed anything. So it was like a super success. It was just a little clean 8-point so I got to kill a 8-point that I wanted to, and bowed him out. And then we still had like a couple days, but that was the last day for that thing. So we get that deer out, boat him out, do all the things, and we go hang him up at Brad's house. And then it's like, what are we going to do? And again, I think this is where Brad's like, I can't believe these guys do this shit. We're like, all right, we found a spot on the map that looks really cool. And we both like immediately looked at it, and we were like, yep, we got to go there. So, and Brad's like, we only got like an hour and a half, guys. Like, yeah, so let's go. Yeah, absolutely.
What was pitched to me? We're going to go to this peninsula. We got to go all the way down the end of this road. We got to go down this super steep boat ramp, and then we're going to go to this peninsula. And we think that we can get in there and get set up, but we got to portage this little island to get. So we got to kayak across. We're going to portage this island. We're going to get back in the kayak. Then we're going to go another 300-400 yards in the kayak, and we're going to set up, and it should work out. I'm like, we're going to, what? And they're like, yeah, we're going to save time, because we could have went out around the other one, Like, no, we're going to save time. We're going to port this out. It'll be fine. Just get in the boat.
Yeah. And so this is like where it gets wild. Cause I mean, like the next morning after all this transpires, Eric goes, I don't care what happens today. This has been the best hunt. This has been the best week of hunting. So Eric, like you tell us, like, and again, there was a lot of fumbling around the night before, like before we got to the exciting stuff. But anyway, take it from there, Eric.
So we drive to the end of this road. We get everything unloaded and park the trucks, and we start paddling, right? So we get over there, which it was only like 10 feet. We had to pull them out and to cross. Yeah. It wasn't bad.
Was much worse than what actually happened.
Yeah. So we get them, and then we start paddling to where we want to go, and we didn't even get there, and there was 2 deer right out on the point, right next to the water. So we parked the kayaks, and we're like, this is where we want to go in, because we think they're going to come off of this peninsula and try to get to these fields. So we're going to try to cut them off. And I don't know what that really thick, brushy crap is next to the water down there, but you can't even walk through it. So we're trying to find a path to get through it. And we finally do, and we get into this peninsula, and then you can't even, the crap in there is so thick, you can't even walk through that. So we finally,
with no leaf on it. So it was just that big dead kudzu vine. For anyone that hunts the South, I know exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, like you can't even walk through it. So we're just crashing through there, 3 of us making all kinds of freaking noise. Then we end up popping out on the other side of the peninsula. And then we had to walk the edge of the water, which is just this muck, nasty, sounds like you're walking through turds or something every time you pick your boot up. And so by now we're almost to the field edge that we wanted to kind of set up on. So we found a way through that thick, brushy stuff, whatever it is, and worked our way up to the field, and we all got in there, and we kind of dropped down, and we're all just looking around and kind of glassing, and we didn't see any deer there. So I was like, let's get up to that corner, because there was a corner on the edge of the field that was probably like, I don't know, 30 yard offset or something in the field there. So we're sneaking up to the corner, and I guess I was the first one in line. And I drop down, and we start looking, and I think Brad's actually like, there's a deer right there, or me, I don't remember who it was. And then come to find out, we start looking, and there was 3 bucks in the field already, and a doe, a spike, and then 2 other bucks. I think they were both kind of smaller bucks, but whatever. So we're like, oh man, this is freaking cool, and we're like, I don't remember who mentioned it, but somebody's like, let's try rattling or grunting or something. And so we I don't know, Brad put on the whole show with the rattling antlers and got all crazy, and we're grunting and pawing the ground. And the two of the bigger bucks ended up working across the field, and the doe, I don't know where she went, but the spike, the smaller buck,
takes the doe through the field just before we started calling.
okay, but so there was still a spike left, and he started coming at us, and then we were on the edge of the field, and we just got in the wood line a little bit, all 3 of us, and the spike, he was super interested, and he came in to check it out. So what he did was he cut in the woods off the field, and he tried to circle downwind of us, and he kept coming at us, and Adam had ranged it, and I was like, I'm gonna shoot, if I can get a shot. So he's working in, kind of slow, taking his time, and Adam ranged him at 40. So I dialed my sight to 40, and I was like, I told Adam, I was like, he needs like 5 steps and I'll have a shot. So I pull the bow back, and I'm waiting, Well, he made those 5 steps, but as he made them, he kind of came at us on an angle. So now he was probably only 30 yards. And I had held the bow back for, I don't know, it felt like forever, probably a minute or two. And I set the pin on him and I was rock steady. And I hit the trigger on my release and I shot right over his back. Because he worked into about 30 and my slider was set at 40. So he took off out of there. And yeah, it was a freaking rodeo. Awesome. Awesome. And then did we run across the field after that?
Yeah. So then we ran across the field to the other field. And there was nothing in the other field, but then there was deer in the field that we were in. So we ran back there, and then we grunted, rattled, and did all sorts of crap.
So there was 2 fields, and the original field we're in was like 90 yards wide. So after I muffed that shot and boogered that all up, all the deer were gone. So we all crossed that field, and there was like 100 yards of woods, and then there was another field. So we crossed that field, went through the woods, which actually there was some rubs and stuff in that woods. Got to the other field, we're glassing that. We didn't see nothing. So then we're like, screw it, let's go back to the other field. So then we go back to the other field. And then by that time there was a couple more deer up in the corner. So then we did the whole rodeo again. And we'll let Brad talk about what happened then.
That was so when we first made it back across, we realized our wind was bad for sitting in the woods where we were. If the deer had been in the woods, like they would end up doing what they were going to do on the other side and try and circle down from us. We were going to do the call in and all the fun shit, and we realized they were going to circle down from us. They were going to get our wind in the 100 yards of woods they had between us. So we decided we were going to go get back over in the other side, go back over to where we originally were, essentially, 60, 80, 100 yards up farther. So we were kind of in the middle of the field versus on that little point. And we made it about to the edge and look up, and there's 2 doe in the field. And we're like, oh, shit. So Eric just went straight, which probably is what I should have followed Eric. But again, following Adam, taking Dad's advice. He's like, we need to get up here on this dry spot and cut them off, get a 30-yard cutoff on them and cut in, and they'll get to us sooner. And I'm like, shit, I'm gone. So I take off. I get to one point. I drop my pack. Like we're about to do this thing. There's 60, 70 yards in the field. And I get about 10 yards from the field edge where it's kind of thicker, smaller sapling kind of brush. And I look up and they're at I don't know, 60 yards in front of me, but they're straight downwind from me. And I'm looking at Eric, and Eric's all set up. He's in the right spot. And I'm like, man, I'm going to blow this shit up. And Adam's somewhere in the middle of us. And sure shit, they come down. And I mean, if I had been at the field edge, they'd have probably been a 40, 50-yard shot when they got to me. And I guess Eric was probably 25, 30 yards behind me. And so Adam's like giving me these military hand signals on which way I need to shoot, and he's trying to give me range numbers and shit. And I'm like, I can't shoot. Like, it's all just too thick. It was a small sapling, like canopy kind of stuff. And I'm like, I can't get a shot through it. I couldn't even range through it, like, let alone to get a shot through it. And so they kind of booger off and they go up into the end. So we all kind of link back up again, and we decide we're just going to sit in this like ankle deep water at the edge of the field and do all the dumb rattling shit over again and see if we can just make something happen for the last 20 minutes, 10 minutes of light. And I'm looking down on the edge, and the doe had ran down to the end of the field. They're at like 150, 160 yards at the end of the field, and they're feeding. So they're still there. And these 2 were behind me. And I remember I got my binos up, and I'm looking, and I turned to say something to them. And when I came back, the one doe is tail up, hauling ass out of the field, and another deer is running into the field. And I'm like, fuck, 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 fuck. Like, I didn't see what it was, but that's just, the way it played out, that had to have been what it was. And so Eric moves up, and now me and Eric are in mud puddle together. And Adam's again, he's out of buck tags for the day, so he's playing cameraman. He's got either my camera or the cell phone, and so we kind of move up and we're watching these deer at the end of the field, and they're 150, 200 yards. Is where they kind of stayed in the beginning of, and then finally the other one there was something over in the woods we were in blowing, but I don't know if it was catching movement or what. But every time it would blow, and the other deer wouldn't even they'd look at it and then they'd go back to doing what they were doing. It'd blow again and they'd look at it and go back. They didn't give a shit. And finally I was like, all right, let's do it. So I started smashing antlers. I guess Adam had to go get my pack, and he came back with my pack and threw me the rattling antlers. And we're hitting grunt calls and rattling, and I look up and this deer is beelining down the edge of this field at us. I mean, it's the last deer in the field. It's coming. I'm like, holy shit. So it gets to, I guess 90 is when the first time it kind of hung up. And so I kind of grunt again, and Adam starts grunting, and I wave him off because it stopped as soon as Adam started grunting. And I'm like, well, fuck it. So I start rattling again, and Eric starts pawing the ground. And as soon as Eric starts pawing the ground, that thing put the brakes on, full dead sprint at 70, 75 yards, turned the hell around and got out of there. I don't know if it thought maybe there was a big buck down there it didn't want to tangle with or what. We never saw antlers. The only thing I can come up with is it's probably a button buck, the way it ran into the field like it did, and the doe ran off, and then it kind of milled around there for a minute and then came down there to the sound of rattling. I mean, I've never seen a doe run in it rattling. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me how wrong I am, and it's the best way to kill does or something. But it came in. It hung up at about 70, and again with low light, I'm not taking a 70-yard shot to begin. That night probably would have. If we'd have had a doe at 70 yards broadside, I'd have probably ripped it. Just because we were having so much just freaking fun, and that was kind of that. We got to the edge of that, and we decided with a little bit of light left, we were going to get the hell out of there so that we could see where we were going, and the guys were going to head back in there in the morning.
Well, yeah, it was a bad wind for the morning, so we were like, well, it's a good wind for you at a spot just up the road. So we're like, all right, well, we're going to go up there, and we go in there, send Eric up to one of your pins, and I went in the next drainage over, and my setup, I got to where I wanted to be, but it wasn't right. I ended up seeing a couple of does, and I think they went and bedded off on the point, which would have made sense for them. But Eric had a pretty eventful morning.
Yeah, so I went off of one of Brad's pins, and I climbed up to the top of this ridge, and he said there was a bunch of scrapes up there. There's 6 scrapes in a row and some rubs and stuff. And on my way up, I got at the very top of that ridge there, and there was a bed right there. And then I kind of knew where I was going because we had talked about it before I went in there. So I set up for the wind we had that morning, and got up the tree, and it was early again. Well, it's 7:00, and I set up on the leeward side of it, and I didn't even have everything set up in the tree. I had I was on my platform. I had my bow. I had my backpack hanging up, but I didn't have the 360 out yet. I didn't have my camera arm out yet. And I heard something to my right. I look over, and there's a buck coming at me. He's 10 yards away. So he was coming right at me, and he kind of turned last second. And when he got in front of the tree I was in, I grabbed my bow and pulled it back, and I was kind of following him, and I had about a 15, 20 yard window there. And then after that, I wasn't going to get a shot. So I stopped him, and I shot, and I missed him.
Well, but that's not exactly what happened. I mean, you said, I just hit a buck, not feeling good about the shot.
I said I just shot one. I thought I hit him. And then so I'm sitting there, I'm sitting there, and I told you guys I didn't feel good about it. Like it just didn't feel good. So I was like, well, I'm gonna wait, a couple hours and try to wait and then get down. Cause when he ran off, he like freaking mule kicked and he ran like 30 yards and stopped, and his tail was kind of flickering and like everything you would think of, when you shoot a deer. And he looked like he was wobbling a little bit. And then I lost him, and I don't know where he went. So I'm sitting there, I'm texting you guys. I'm like, I shot one. I don't know. I don't really feel good about the shot. Like, I don't know, but I'm going to sit here for a couple hours, whatever. And I don't know. It was like maybe a half hour later, I heard crashing, and I had a doe come run down the ridge by me. And then shortly after that, I had a freaking spike come up over the ridge, like 30 yards away, and he was moving nose to the ground. Then he dropped down the drainage, and I'm like, man, I need to get down and look at this arrow, because if I sit here any longer, like I can't shoot another one. So I get down, I go over there, and there was no hair on the arrow, no blood on the arrow, just straight dirt. So I picked it up, went back to the tree, climbed up, texted you guys, said I freaking missed him, whatever. So just completely whiffed the shot. I don't have any excuses other than I whiffed it.
I mean, I feel like that's, I feel so bad, like and I it's so weird because I always feel this way, but it's like, you have had like the roughest go, I feel like, of all this stuff. I think like until this hunt, like out of state, because when we went to Ohio, was that Missouri, you were in Bucks. I was gonna say, I feel like this is like where you're like not having opportunities at, like not seeing good bucks or whatever. But that wasn't this trip. This trip you were like absolutely covered up in deer, it seemed like, every single day. So like the ups and the downs are crazy.
Well, it's, that's how this game goes. And I can't, like, the trip would have obviously been better if I would have got a deer. But at the same time, like, I had my opportunities and I freaking blew them. And I know that, you know what I mean? Like, it couldn't have went any better other than me actually shooting a deer instead of missing them. Like, I was in them. Like, I mean, that's all you can ask for, is having the opportunity.
And I think that that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up, like, for guys that are listening, is that, like, there is a camp of hunters that, and I think, like, for me, there's easier pills to swallow because of, like, elk hunting and stuff like that. But there are guys who are like, if I don't kill something, like, it wasn't a success, like, I failed. And I mean, we collectively had a ball. And I think that's one of the things, like, sometimes you come home, at least for me, and I feel like we could have did more, or we could have, like, left more out there. But for this trip, it just seemed like there was a lot of opportunities. We kind of like did everything we set out to do. We were validated in our choices of, like, spots, like, everything. We went where we went, and it wasn't like we were setting up on, like Brad was alluding to earlier, like we weren't setting up on, like, marginal sign or, like, whatever. Like, it was, some of that stuff was, okay, this is exactly where it was supposed to be, and it looks right. And maybe we were a little bit off of, like, the best sign, but then when we were able to go and look at it in the daylight, it was like, holy shit, this is where we need to be. This is what we need to do. But it was validated in, like, our process and all of those things, but it didn't have to be, like, to shoot something, and you had said, like, no matter what happens, like this was the best freaking trip. Like it was a great week, like everything. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it was, that's what I said. That morning I said, no matter what happens today, like this has been my best and funnest out of state hunt trip I've had. So, I mean, we were in the deer. We had pins that, I mean, were, in my opinion, damn near perfect without ever setting foot on the ground. I mean, where you killed your buck, we had pinned. I mean, that first night or first morning, I mean, I seen them 2 bucks. Like that was right close to one of my pins, never being in there. It validated that what we're doing is actually pretty dang good.
And then for you, Brad, being like in your home state and like, essentially hunting like you were out of state because you'd never been to these places, and it was like completely, it would seem like foreign to you, like the process, right? Like, how did your week go from like what you had expected to do? You're like, I'm going to show these boys around, or like whatever. Like, how did it go for you? Was it the same experience as Eric?
Yeah, it was the funnest time I've had in the Tennessee woods, just like running around doing the Patreon hunt shit. Like, there's a lot of like, when you're at your house or when you're at your home turf, there's expectations and goals and things you set. And, you don't go in on the 180-degree wrong way to see what happens most of the time, right? Throwing the rut in there mixes it up a little bit, but you're looking for certain things. You're looking for certain winds. You're looking for certain areas, certain signs. And then to go hang out with you guys and do the like, if something happens, it happens kind of thing. It just, it's just super refreshing. It's a way better way to hunt, in my opinion. And I just don't know how, like, I've been trying. I was telling my wife at dinner tonight. We went to the pizza place we were all supposed to go to, and we're sitting there, and I said, I learned more this week in the woods, in the collective, 6 hunts I had or 5 hunts that I had. In those collective hunts, I learned more about just e-scouting and sign and things that I thought I knew about or I thought I understood from the podcasting stuff and we're at one point, Adam standing there, he's like, this is like the Jake Bush way of looking at things, or this is the Alex Chop way, or Parker McDonald would be set up right here. And it validated all that information that for the last, couple years that I've been listening to through podcasts and it made it tangible. And I definitely don't learn. I'm not an audio learner, right? I'm more of like I got to see it. And to go somewhere and have somebody that actually understood what he was doing explain it to me in a way that I understood it now, and I feel like I could explain it to other people if I needed to. I'm looking for those M's, as I keep saying. Like that's my jam. Like that's gonna be my new terrain feature that I'm gonna try and find, buck-wise, obviously, right? But the ability to have it's the what do they call it? If you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room kind of thing. And I felt like I was not the smartest guy in the room, even though we were hunting my area. I was not the smartest guy in the room this week, and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. And I followed, Daddy Miller and Uncle Eric around, and I learned a lot.
Well, I think, that sounds ridiculous, because I think Eric and I both fumble around a lot. But I think, and this was what I had said earlier, like on the way down, like the strange part about the whole thing is that like all this information is out there from like the Mapping Trophy Bucks book, or like all the podcasts, or like, the Dan Infault videos and all of that stuff, and the hunting public and the Latitude does a great job, like in some of their like hunt breakdown series, like to where they show how it works, but you kind of have to get out there and you got to stand in that drainage, or you have to be on the leeward side of that hill, and you have to be there on the wrong wind to say, oh, well, that's why I keep getting busted, and like you have to be able to, like, when I say, like, you have to, every time you hunt, you should be trying to learn something from it. Like, Eric needs to bring his rangefinder and not trust me. And, he needs to, whatever, look at the riser on his bow and there it says slow down and chill out,
I definitely need to look at that.
But that's the thing, is like, every time you go out there and like, if you make a mistake, or however you want to view that mistake, like you say, like, why? And then if you're actually like actively listening to these guys talk, and like for me, being able to have had so many conversations with them, like it would be like very disingenuous or, whatever, of me to walk into the woods and like not try to apply that information. Right. Cause I'm taking these guys' time. I'm taking up everybody who's listening's time to try to get these guys to explain all this stuff. And then when I go in the woods, I sit there and I go, like, what would Jake Bush do in this situation? What would Andy May do in this situation? Like, this is what I would do, and I'm not getting the results that I want. So what can I do differently? Or how can I, actually like slow down? I mean, one of the things that we didn't even really talk about is like, and it goes back to like that sign, that hot sign, all that stuff. Like on our scouting day, like when Eric and I were scouting there, it's so freaking funny to me, because I looked over and I said, that's a spot that Eric would like to check out. I said, Eric, there's your spot right there. There's your thing. And he's like, oh, we're going to go over there and look at that. And we walked out there and all the sign was there, and we had our licenses at that point. It was raining. I grabbed my bow. We didn't have a rangefinder. We didn't have a gut tube. We didn't have anything. And we're walking out there and we're going kind of slow. And we jumped up a 130-inch buck that was bedded with a doe, like 100, like literally one of those things where normally where we stand there and we say, oh, there should be a scrape over there. Well, we stood over there and like Eric didn't even get the words out of his mouth. Like if they were going to be bedded, they'd be bedded right. Boom. The end of the peninsula explodes and this buck and this doe get up and jump up and run away. But it's like applying that thing. Like when Eric went in there and ended up missing that deer, and he had all them deer around him. We had seen, you had said you saw a 140-inch buck run up that ridge the night before on the way out after our rodeo hunt. And it took like 30 seconds for Eric and I both to look at that. And you said, oh, there's a field there and there's a hidden field back there. Well, on the wind that we were out there hunting, it was a perfect place for that buck to be bedded. And it's like, you need to go out there and hunt that buck coming off that peninsula, because he's going to do it again. Or if he doesn't do it, another deer is going to be doing it the same way. And you can go out there and absolutely screw it up, but it will validate that that deer was out there. And you just need to figure out what happened. Like, why did we fail? Like how did I get busted or whatever? And that's the fun part, is like taking the information and using it. And I think speak for you, Eric, but like, I think that's the beauty of like going out of state, is like trying to figure something new out, or to be able to feel like, let's see if this works, and like we freaking failed in Ohio. I mean, we went down there and scouted, and I did get in on a big buck. But even in those failures, like everything that we learned, we were able to apply in Tennessee. All the things that we sucked at, we got to, and I think you had said that on the way home, like going into Ohio, I think, like, how do you think that helped us in Tennessee?
Well, it helped immensely because, well, for one, Ohio was the first time that I had ever dealt with hills or drainages or anything. So, at some point I want to go back to Ohio and apply what I know now, because I feel like be a lot better off. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see a deer in Ohio, but I learned a freaking ton in Ohio, obviously. And when, we went to Tennessee, I applied that and look what happened. Like, game changer, right? It's totally different outcome.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing is like what whether you hear it or you see it, like you got to be in that mindset of like, why isn't it working out for me? And like I said, I think Brad, you're the same as Frank, where you're just like, I just shoot deer, like deer come by and I kill them, like it isn't like, I'm not looking for this or that, but like on a level, I think that's what you really want. And it isn't a situation where it's like, well, you need to stop shooting the small ones because you're not doing that. It's just like you're just not looking for the same stuff because you're shooting deer.
That's what we talked about. It's like I go for the area where I have the highest percentage of seeing a deer, not the deer, but a deer. And then I bank off the, rolling the dice of the deer I'm willing to release. The buck, won't say the deer, because obviously I'll shoot whatever slickhead walks in. I don't give a shit. I was trying to hit a fawn. But like, when the deer I'm willing to release an arrow on walks through, it's a great day. But it's also a great day when I shoot two deer, two doe and saw, two spikes or two, a 3-point spike. And like that was super validating, as well as, the other side where, or the other night, when we did our rodeo shit, that was super validating in that, like, I always thought like I was telling you guys before, like I thought those real antlers sounded like shit to me. And like, that's why I switched grunt tubes, because I thought they sounded like shit. And then I still had a little bit of that, like, but I've rattled 2 bucks in with that black rack. So like, in recent whatever, but, that black rack sounds the way it's supposed to in my brain, right? Like I've rattled the 140 in, I've rattled the spike in. So we got both ends of the spectrum. And like that grunt tube's where I want it to be. And like, so just, there's all those validation things that, like you said earlier, just really nice to put together and prove to yourself that you can do what you set out to do. And now I need to start hunting the deer, not some deer, I guess is how I'm going to put that.
And it's tough, I guess like it's twofold. So for guys that are listening that are like, well, when I go out of state, like I don't, you want to be hunting the deer and you go on, but you still do want to see deer. You don't want to go for 2 different trips and whatever and see no deer. Like that's a big, kick in the dick. But at the same time, if you're just seeing button buck after button buck after button buck, like you're not in the right spot if you're out of state, like, and Tennessee is different where you got tags on tags on tags. So if you want to just shoot stuff, that's cool too. But I think for you, my guess would be it's just a balance. We talked about it, but like, Eric, when you hunt at home, like how many deer are you seeing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we talked about it. I don't see a ton of deer, but I feel a lot of that has to do with the way I hunt, because I'm trying to get that one deer. I'm trying to meet up with that one buck. I'm not trying to, I'm typically trying to get them coming off of bedding. So I mean, I see a lot less deer than most people, and not trying to say that I'm just a big buck hunter. I mean, I've killed a few nice bucks, but that's just kind of what I've gravitated towards in the last few years, is that style of like bed hunting and getting them off their bed. So yeah, I see way less deer than most people.
And so I think like for that point, like Brad, down where you're at, it's you gotta be okay with like not seeing anything, but being set up to see. And I think that's essentially like our out of state hunting in a nutshell is like, and that's the thing. It's like, so the buck that I killed is not the biggest buck in Tennessee. I'm definitely happy with it. And I mean, I was watching the recovery video earlier. I was like, I'm elated. That's what I said. We've been out of state a whole bunch of times, never killed shit together. And then, to do it the way that we did it, where we did it, how we did it, like everything went just perfectly. But that deer wasn't the deer that was laying down all that big sign. That buck could have been a 180-inch buck that came over that ridge because we were in the right spot to see, and I think that's the thing is like, I think you need to do like Mondays and Wednesdays. I go and grocery shopping, and then, Saturdays and Mondays, those are the days that I go after the big bucks, and just depending on the wind, like wherever it's right, because that's, you being in state and having the opportunity to do that is, an incredible thing. I mean, because they're there.
Yeah, I definitely think that like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday deal from now on will be that grocery shopping type, just kind of going in where I deer should be, and if a good buck walks by, a good buck walks by. But the my second biggest buck, the 130-inch buck I shot in 21 or 22, whatever it was, but my best season ever. I was hunting the buck then. I knew the way the peninsula laid out. I knew it was going to be a lockdown area for a bigger buck. Like it all. I was hunting a buck that day. I wasn't just hunting that day, and I feel like I have the ability to pull that off, but I also don't like not seeing deer. And it's kind of like we were talking about when y'all were driving home. In early and late season, it's not a strange day if I see 20, 30 deer in one sit. But like to go and see no deer, I feel like I'm not in the right area or I'm not accomplishing anything. And I guess I got to somewhere bridge that gap to where, no deer in the right area is still a good sit versus, I saw 30 deer here yesterday. I sit here today and there's no deer. Something's wrong. I got to figure out what the problem is. So I think somewhere I got to bridge that mental gap of like hunting deer versus hunting the deer. And I don't mean like a deer, right? Like I'm not hunting Little John or Big Bruce or whatever. Like I'm hunting a certain, I don't even want to say age class, but like if you get up in that 100-inch buck range, I'm definitely gonna, I don't want to say 100% of the time, but if you're in that 100, definitely in the 120-inch range, no questions asked, I'm gonna send it. But and that's like you guys are talking about your out of state deals or even at home, or this is what your plans are. Your riser says relax, his riser says slow down, my riser says send it. So like that's just, I think the mentality between the three of us is I got the Subway send it sticker on my limb that when I'm at full draw and I'm thinking, should I really shoot? Like look down and it says, yeah, no, you should let that arrow fly. And that's kind of how that whatever night that I didn't shoot that doe, texting Adam, I was like, man, I don't want to blow up his spot and blah 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 and whatever. And like he's like, I think you should shoot. And hunting with you guys, I feel like completely acceptable. But I feel like there's a group of people that I could hunt with somewhere that like to shoot does in November is taboo or you're not allowed to do it. And then here I am shooting 2 does on the first morning. I'm stacking up with you guys, and all of a sudden we're high fiving and trying to flip over old truck cabs and shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the experience, right? And I'm glad that you brought that up because I had that I did a podcast with Kevin Vistison with the Deer Hunter podcast. And we talked about like taking those out of state trips and like, you know, he's a Michigan through and through, and he's like, I'm not going to go out of state. But I think like being able to like remove yourself from that mindset and be able to like put yourself in a whole nother, you know, like you don't have all the time in the world. You have to be efficient. Like you change the way that you're viewing things, and like it becomes like a little less, I mean, at least for me, and I mean, I'd imagine Eric's similar, but the standards are different. Like you want to go down there and have a good time. Like, yeah, you want to see deer, you'd like to kill deer, but like Eric used the word 750 times this week of adventure. Like we did a lot of adventuring. And then to be able to, you know, put those deer in the boat. I mean, like from the first day, like, you know, shooting 2 does in one sit. Like I've never been on a hunt, I don't think, with anybody where somebody shot 2 deer in one sit. You know, I've never done it. I know that there's guys that do it all the time, and I'd imagine if you have 400 tags, then it's a whole nother thing. But it just isn't. I mean, Eric's never shot a doe, let alone 2 in one day. So you're not messing up our experience. It was just like cool. It was like, well, at least somebody shot something on this one. And I even thought that it was cool that like you kind of did it in our spot instead of like you went to like, you know, your spot where there's deer here all the time and like I'm going to shoot some deer. Like you went in and you got to figure it out, and then you got validated, like you said, in going into a spot blind and gray light and shooting deer. And it was just like you were, it was like, you know, in a way, like we weren't hunting your spot. So it wasn't like, it was kind of like you were on an out of state hunt too, you know?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So,
except for I had to, every night I came home and slept in my own bed and had a kid with pneumonia and had to sit out of the woods and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, but the flip side, you know, right? Glass half full, glass half empty. If you were out of state and your kid had pneumonia and all this other shit going on, like it would have been a whole nother, you know, you'd had to pack up from Michigan and drive home. So you got the best of both worlds. So it's good balance, you know?
And I didn't have to kayak through a ditch in a thunderstorm. So I was sitting in my living room thinking, oh shit, I hope they don't die.
Yeah. Yeah. They're going to have pneumonia and I'm going to have to treat them. But yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of like close it out. Eric, your like parting thoughts about, you know, out of state hunting, water access, and M's.
M's. Yeah, I mean, I would water access any day over walking just because of the adventure. And you know, just think of how many people that we cut out running into water access wise instead of walking in. And out of state, if anybody's on the fence about it, I say do it. You know, you got to have you got to know that who you're going out of state with is a solid person that you get along with well and can hunt with well. And I think Adam and I have a pretty similar hunting style, so I think it works well when we go out of state. And yeah, it's just a great time, and it's not just killing deer. You know, it's hanging out with your buddies. It's, you know, validating what you know, learning more. You know, you're just adding more to your hunting portfolio. So.
And Brad, what about like, you know, getting out of your comfort zone or like whatever? I mean, you know, you said it a bunch, like it's like I say, it's ridiculous because like the world's worst bow hunter right here. And you're like, I learned so much. He was giving a master class about bullshit. Like,
no, and I said it a bunch. And again, back to the hunting with people, it is so much easier. But back to, I'm looking for an Eric, right, or an Adam. I don't care. I'll be the Eric, like whichever you got to be. it'd be even better if I found an Adam, like somebody with a podcast and all the extra shit. Like that'd be tight. uh, but to have another person that's in the same uh, mental state and goal state that you are to hunt with is so much easier. To go in with you guys that I knew we were going to hunt hard, we were going to have fun, and we were either going to get it or not. Like and no one was going to get upset in the end. It's easy to throw a kayak in the water. Like I said, my shoulders were hurting at the end of the week. Like, my body was tired, and I wasn't hunting half as much as you guys were. So, like, uh, to find somebody that's willing to do that with makes that all so much easier. But there's a lot of times where I sit here and I'm like, man, I know the wind's right, everything's right for that spot that I kayak to, but I just don't want to do the work. And I don't know if it's a touch of laziness, it's a touch of that not wanting to fail. But after this week and seeing like Eric said, the vast amount of people that we eliminated from the picture, especially as we roll into this Orange Army season and the rifle season, the spot where I'm running into guys in the spots that I normally would be in. To throw that kayak, to show up an extra half hour early to get the kayak in the water and get to where I need to get doesn't sound as bad anymore after this week. Like, or to get the battery I've been procrastinating on and throwing that trolling motor on and absolutely opening up way more terrain. It's a little higher on the priority list than it was a week ago. And then I guess I'll close with saying, despite what you just heard, there's no deer in Tennessee. The tagging system sucks. It's super expensive. Don't come down here. You won't enjoy yourself. Stay wherever the hell you're at. Out of state hunts suck, and don't bring anybody with you.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Ohio and Indiana, so it doesn't matter. We're going to Kansas next year, so that's but
that's the way it is.
But man, I really appreciated hunting with you guys this week. It was definitely a lot of fun. Very eye opening to me. Like I said, for a guy who's nervous about accessing through water, don't want to die, all those things that I mean, the thunderstorm thing was, I guess that's where I felt the most vulnerable. I guess I was very comfortable on the water very quickly. But yeah, it just an awesome week. And again, for anybody that's like on the fence or like saying, okay, I don't know if I want to, we say it about hunting camp, and I think like going out of state is just like a small hunting camp, but it just gives you a lot more, like I said, a way to kind of test your skills and like go try to figure it out. So definitely recommend it. But I appreciate it, guys. And Brad, thanks for the hospitality, letting us cut up some deer in your garage.
Thanks for the half a Mountain Dew and the half a case of beer that I found in my shop. And
yeah. I left the Mountain Dew for your kids, but the beer was for you.
I walked out there, I was like, oh shit, look what I found.
Oh man. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Attention all big game hunters. Waypoint TV and Winchester Ammunition have partnered up to bring you the legendary Big Game Giveaway. Want a chance to win a Winchester XPR rifle and other gear totaling over $1,400? Just visit Waypoint TV's social media pages and look for the link in our bio for your chance to win. Now through November 21st, you can enter daily for your chance to win this legendary prize package that includes a Winchester XPR rifle, a Supreme rifle scope, 200 rounds of Winchester 350 Legend ammo, a Nilo Preserve shooting box, and even more gear for your camp and home. Don't miss your shot at this amazing prize. Enter now by clicking the link in all of Waypoint TV's social platforms. Good luck and stay safe out there this season.
What's your favorite hunting tradition? My brother Thomas and I like to get all our gear out, clean it, organize it, and then we sit down with our calendars and plan out the season. Well, hunting season is finally here, and at Academy Sports and Outdoor Store has everything to gear up for the field for less. Plus, shop a wide selection of ammo, shotguns, rifles, feeders, game cameras, camo, and more from the brands you trust. If you need a hunt license, it ain't no problem. You can pick it up in store while you're shopping. Text HUNT24 to 22369 to take $20 off $100 when you shop hunting supplies at academy.com. That's HUNT24 to 22369 to take $20 off $100 when you shop at academy.com.